Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 7th episode of Genealogy Pep Talk, a podcast. My name is Suzanne, and I'm a library specialist with Arapahoe Libraries here in Colorado. I also have two cohorts with me who are my fellow co-hosts of this podcast. There is Cindy, a library specialist, and Katie, a reference librarian. Hi, ladies.
Hello.
Hello.
This podcast is about gathering some tips and tricks for your family search journey for whenever you get stuck on searching for an ancestor, because it does happen. We also share with you some of our own experiences, anecdotes, and stories in researching our own families. And as you know and have discussed in the past with your own families, we sometimes have uncovered a mystery and have been surprised and or shocked by that discovery. Today, we have another special guest joining our podcast who has had one of those wow moments. Her name is Molly, and she is one of our Arapahoe Library's fellow staff members, and she's a collection librarian. Hello, Molly, and welcome.
Hello.
Okay, so let's just cut to the chase, Molly. King Louis XVI of France? Seriously? Do tell. Just start at the beginning with that nugget.
Yes, so my grandmother was researching our genealogy and came up with the fact that we are distantly related to King Louis the 16th. He's apparently my great uncle times 7. So when I was 16, she shared this story with me. And of course, being a 16-year-old, I didn't think much of it. I just kept it in the back of my mind. And now I wish I had gotten a little bit more information because these were the days before internet.
So, in other words, the interweb, right?
Correct.
Okay. So, but not parchment paper yet. So maybe old lineographs or whatever.
It's quite possible.
Okay. So, yeah, how did your grandmother get started on that? Did she just have a family Bible? Did she have something, handed down to her?
I believe she had records handed down to her by her parents. I used to have a copy, but of course, being a 16-year-old, I did not keep it.
Oh,
Yeah.
That's a bummer.
Yeah, I mean, and it's so amazing how she could trace that back before DNA testing and the internet, because she couldn't just go online and say, oh, I'm going to go look up the Bourbon dynasty and I think that this is, are we related to them or whatever. So she just had to write letters, probably in French, I don't know. But you have to write to the actual places, the town halls, the churches, parishes. So that's doubly amazing.
Agreed.
I wonder, because in my family, my grandmother always said that we were directly descended from William the Conqueror of England, and there was a Dunham who emigrated from England, and it was always presumed that he was part of that lineage. So I wonder if your grandmother was able to trace to a certain person who then it just sort of fell in line would be, because we would know the ancestry to a certain point of the royal families. So I wonder if it was a similar type of situation and she was able to just go back to this person and say, okay, well, I know for sure that this person is descended from King Louis the 16th, etc. And then say, well, there's our connection, and that's it.
That makes a lot of sense. That's probably what happened. I know my grandmother did keep in contact because the House of Bourbon fell, and a lot of my relatives moved from France to Quebec and New Brunswick. And I know my grandmother kept in contact with some of them and had some of that information.
So what's your background? Are you French or French Canadian?
So I am French. I'm also mostly German, English, which I was a little surprised to find out, and a little bit of Dutch, and a lot of Swedish.
Oh, okay.
That's
Very
a
good.
lot of stuff.
Yeah, it is a lot of stuff. Okay, so now I have to ask this because everybody knows here I still haven't slobbered on my ancestry DNA thingamajig. But have you done that? Have you slobbered, Molly?
I have slobbered extensively.
Okay,
yes. 2 different DNA tests. I've done the 23andMe and I've done the Ancestry.com.
Okay, and what did each say?
Pretty much what I expected.
Okay.
I was not surprised, but I was pleasantly reassured of my heritage. So.
Got it. Very good. Okay, so you're kind of boring in a
I
way.
am very
Yeah.
boring European.
Right. But I am intrigued, though, to go back to your House of Bourbon and your King Louis the 16th, maybe very, very distant cousin. Yeah?
Yes.
Probably? Okay. But that, to me, is intriguing because who knew? Does anyone of us know that all of a sudden we have royalty? We're just working in a library, and all of a sudden we've got some royalty in our background, you know? I think that's pretty neat to have that in your history.
My grandmother never failed to remind me every time, remember, you're descended from royalty.
Oh, that is funny.
Very good.
Molly's our princess.
Yes, you are a princess.
Molly right now is having a face grimace that says no.
No.
So did your ancestry, did you find any connections so far yet? The French connection, should we say?
Hey.
Yeah.
Nice one.
Yes, between you and any descendants of that House of Bourbon.
Most of them are the family members from the United States. It hasn't quite gone over to Canada yet, though I know of people who have made connections in Canada. So it's only a matter of time.
So those French ancestors have got to get on it
Right?
and start slobbering as well so that you can make those connections. Because your connections are only as good as
Right.
the other people that have slobbered.
Yeah. Stop slobbering over the French Bordeaux, 1928.
Yes.
But slobber on your ancestry DNA slobber machine. Okay.
I was curious, since you did both 23andMe and Ancestry, was there one that you liked better, or what made you decide to do both? Because I, as I've said, did 23andMe, and I've been thinking about doing Ancestry. I like 23andMe, but there's not as many people that have taken it comparatively to Ancestry. And when you're trying to specifically find people you're related to, it's not as helpful with the 23andMe. So do you have any thoughts about that? Which one you preferred, or what was your decision-making process?
So at the time, I think it was my very first Mother's Day, my husband got me the 23andMe kit. And that's the one I was really hoping for because at that time, you didn't have to pay extra for the health data.
Yes.
Yes, now I believe it's an extra $100 almost. And so I was able to get all that information. I had some concerns, and while it's not a diagnosis, it does help me feel a little bit better about that. But after a while, I wasn't meeting too many relatives on there, and a friend of mine had great success with Ancestry, and she said there were a lot of people there, so I tried that one too. And actually, I believe it was Suzanne who mentioned that there was a sale and that I should take it.
Yeah, I probably did because, I'm a little bit of a cheapskate. So, yeah, excellent.
So several people have taken your cheap advice.
Right.
But not you. You've bought it, but you
Right.
haven't actually followed through.
It's funny. I looked at it the other day and I touched the box.
Okay, you're
I
getting
haven't.
there,
I'm getting
Suzanne.
there.
You're
I have
getting
not
there.
moved the box closer to me, and I have not unwrapped the box, but I did touch it.
Okay.
So there we go.
I think we need to maybe have you and Stacy come in and actually do it in front of us so that we can witness that you have slobbered, both of you.
So I have to make all those weird spitting noises,
Yeah.
Yeah.
like in the old days with a spittoon.
Yeah, right.
It'll be great
Ding.
ASMR.
Imagine all the DNA and people in those spittoons.
Ooh.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that's right. All
And
those
then
saloons.
you can place it in the mailbox right outside.
Oh, that's true.
We've got it
Excellent.
all planned for you now.
Oh my
So you have
gosh.
no excuses.
All right. There's more of you, so they're all ganging up.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Okay. This is a good idea. Thank you.
I don't know. Maybe I'll get one and I'll come in and slobber too.
Yeah. Well,
We
get
can-
it.
Three of us slobber.
Okay, that would be a great show,
December
won't
will be
it?
a slobbering.
The slobber show.
Our listeners will be very happy to hear three
Right.
people slobbering into a test tube. Sometimes just listening and not having the video too, like people used to listen to old time radio,
Right.
and sometimes those are even scarier than a video or a movie because your imagination is kind of take you there.
Okay, Molly, so you mentioned to me earlier that you digitized some data. Can you explain what that is and how you got involved with that process?
Yes, it was very exciting. In 2012, I went to the Texas Library Association conference, and my position at the time paid for it, but in exchange, I had to go to a day-long genealogy workshop. And after we discussed genealogy, we spent about an hour discussing that the 1940 census was being digitized at the moment. And they showed us how to get started and what it would entail. And I went straight back to my hotel room, opened up my computer, and started trying to decipher that 1940 handwriting.
So that's exactly what it is, right? It's just trying to figure out what the first name of the person is and the spelling, and if that Y is just a big Y or if it's a weird G. So you have to figure that out. And then you do that when it says at the top of the record, sometimes it's in a bracket, and it has maybe the correct spelling or possible, but otherwise you get some weird stuff. So that's you. You trying to,
Yes.
and all the probably million people who are trying to decipher all of that.
Yes.
Okay.
So what they would do is assign us. We could pick a state, but we couldn't pick an area in that state. But I was doing New York and Pennsylvania at the time, and they would assign you a sheet of the scanned in census sheet, and if you were the first person looking at it, you would do your best to box by box type in what the census taker had written. If you were the second person looking over it, you would verify the information that the first person had put in. And we were able to flag something that we weren't sure about. So if we ran into a Y or a G, is this an N or an R, we would flag it so somebody else could check it out.
You know, we've talked about that before, about how penmanship and handwriting, right now, nobody knows how to read that or decipher that just in general. So imagine, doing that, your due diligence on the census. So thanks for doing that.
It was a lot of fun.
I bet it was, yeah.
I-
Because I get in there and I'm like, no, that's wrong. That certainly looks like a Y. What are they doing? So...
I will say too, on the 1940 census, I've found several mistakes with my family. So it does happen, and nobody's perfect. Yes, I got to be very good at deciphering handwriting and can now pretty much pick out anything that somebody gives me.
Nice.
That's really amazing because, like on previous censi, I have found my family spelling, all kinds of different ways. HAPKA, HOPKE. So many different variations of my maiden name, my family name. So they have three pairs of eyes on every single line of every single census page.
So usually it's 2, unless you really have a problem. But yes.
That is a phenomenal lot of work.
Labor intensive.
Yeah, for sure.
But it's a great cause, though.
Right.
Think of how many millions of people all over the world are wanting to know about the 1940 census,
Right.
the 1950 census, and are, taking advantage of the work that you and all those other, and it's volunteer, correct?
Correct.
Well, I think, you talked about, three eyes. I think it's most important because what do you call a fish with no eye? Fish. Crickets sound. Background, please. Yeah, but I kind of wanted to do that myself. The ditch sites, especially when the 1950 one was starting, and they were looking for people to come on. We need help, because we're all kind of all right. When's it gonna do? And I guess we could have answered our own questions by just volunteering and doing it.
Right. And they wait 10 years in between doing the census. So in 2032, the 1960 census will be out. And the extra 2 years was just to give them time to get the records together and make sure that there wasn't too much sensitive information on there.
Well, and this brings up a point when back in April of 2022, when the 1950 census did come out, I don't know if you remember saying that, you were waiting like till midnight or whenever it actually came out, and a lot of information wasn't there.
Exactly.
And now, it's easy now to see why, and Molly has the answer for us. That people are diligently working as quickly as they can, but you have to decipher all that information and different penmanship from different census takers. So it does take time to make it accurate, and it's time worth waiting for. Now, Molly, are you involved in the 1950 census that just came out in April too?
Yes. I was counting down the days for it to come out. I was waiting for 2022. It was very exciting. I got in right away, and we were able to pick a state and a last name to search for if we wanted to. I did a lot of work for the state of Arizona, which my most interesting story from that was that I did the census page for a mental asylum.
Oh,
yes. Wait, yeah.
That sounds good. You had my attention. I got distracted for a moment, and then you said mental asylum. Do tell. Okay.
Yes. So I don't remember the name of it, but it was really interesting to see all of these different age people line by line and wondering the circumstances that brought them there.
Did you pick that asylum?
No.
Or was it just kind of on a list and that was your next?
It was on a list. I was trying to look for family information, on a
Were
rare
they at
chance.
the asylum? Did you find your relatives in the
No,
asylum?
I did not.
man.
But I do have another interesting story about that
yeah.
from my family.
Ooh.
But I was helping my mother-in-law look for some of her relatives.
I went on and found some of my family on the 1950 census too, and because I was curious, because my last name is notoriously awful and gets misspelled so many different ways. And so I wanted to go on and look at it and make sure it was correct and so that nobody else was interpreting it. And that was quite interesting. And I ended up doing some other things on the same page as well, but that was quite fun.
Yes.
Okay, so Molly, help me with this because I'm still on the mental institution, mental asylum, because that sounds creepier. Thing in on the census and stuff. How'd you get there? First of all,
It was randomly assigned to me when I picked the state of Arizona just to look at some information for my mother-in-law.
okay, so you could pick the state, but you couldn't pick the city or town,
Exactly.
or establishment.
Right.
Okay. So I'm just stunned by that because that to me is so interesting. Any kind of thing like that. I think, even like a boarding school or in the old days or a workhouse, I think those places are just fascinating of that history there because that's a total history mystery.
It is. I'm
sure.
surprised
Yeah.
that they even took the time to count these people.
Yeah.
Because they're completely under the radar. They have no contact with the outside world, really.
Right.
They have no control over their lives.
Right.
And so it's amazing that they were actually counted.
Yeah.
Maybe it was a gentler place.
I would
Maybe.
certainly hope so.
Yeah.
And when I was preparing for today's, I went back to the 1940 census, and I have had trouble finding my dad's dad's side. I could not find them in the 1930s, and I could not find them in the 1940s. So I'm hoping that the 1950 census, once I get access to Pennsylvania, will help me find them. They lived in a national forest in the middle of it, in a house that was built to last only about 10 years, and it is still standing. It was one of those
Nice.
prefab houses.
I
Because
see.
my great-grandfather worked for the oil company. Most people don't think about oil in Pennsylvania, but it was a very big thing. But I was able to find my great-great-grandfather, and I had been looking for him and his wife together. I did not realize that he was a widower by the time the 1940 census came out. And I found him and got another shock when it was the town he lived in, State Hospital, which we all know it was the mental asylum for that town. But then noticed that he was an employee there.
Oh. Oh. Okay.
So I was able to see all the sheets around that, because you can go back and forth and see, a few sheets down, a few sheets forward. And I was able to go back again and look at the patients who had been in there. And to me, it appeared for that one, they gave the census taker a roster because it was all alphabetized.
Oh.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I hear some paper rustling over there.
Well, these are notes that I took on the entries. I do have the copies saved on my laptop, which is also here because I figured you would want to see those too.
This is a podcast, so there's no
Right.
visuals. So I was going to say maybe you could describe what the piece of paper says.
It is a white background, black letters, and there are lots and lots of columns. But when I was randomly assigned this sheet, I discovered that my grandparents were on there. They had just recently got married. They were 19 and 22, and they moved into their own apartment. They didn't have any children yet, and it lists my grandfather as being an auto parts assembler and working at an auto manufacturer.
You see, that's nice. That's some details, not just laborer.
Right.
Yes, but Ford was a big company, is a big company
Right.
in that town, and a lot of people worked there.
Right.
So
That was like a happy accident, as Bob Ross would say,
Right.
that you were assigned that sheet and you actually found your family on that.
yes, as soon as I saw it, I started texting my parents and my sister on our text chain up a storm, sending pictures. I was sending a picture of it to my cousin. It was all a buzz, and it took me a little bit to actually sit down and transcribe it. I had to let the excitement wear off. But yeah, it was randomly assigned. It was fate.
Yeah, it
You know,
was. Nice.
it's that synchronicity that I personally love. Small world kind of thing. Well, gosh, golly. And then you have the synchronicity, and it's just meant to be there. It's refreshing because it's like it was meant for you to see that, and for you to catch that.
Now, was that on the same sheets as the asylum, too?
No, because this was in New York,
Oh.
and the mental asylum was in Arizona.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And let's
Okay.
keep
I guess
going.
we're just still hung up
I
on the mental
know,
asylum.
it's so
Yeah, 'cause I was gonna
exciting.
say-
hardly get past that.
We gotta, let's get back to that because I am fascinated by that. I don't know why. So you said your family member, though, was who worked there, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. What did he or she do? Was he a clerk? Was he an orderly?
He was a laborer.
A laborer. See, there we go. Oy. Okay, well then that's all right because he was probably like an orderly or maybe groundskeeper or
My guess is
In the background,
groundskeeper. We've
yeah.
always been a
Gardening family.
gardening, working outdoors
Okay.
kind of family.
yeah.
Now, I just have to get one more question out.
Yeah.
Because usually on the census, they will have, just the address. So did it say on there, blah, 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 asylum on the top and list all the occupants in there? Or did they list them all as the same address?
So at the top of the sheet, they wrote the town state hospital, which everybody who's from there knows what that is. And it kept the address blank. And they all wrote in employee.
Why'd they leave it blank, I wonder?
Well, because they all lived.
The same.
Yeah,
Oh.
it set it up at the top. They didn't want to repeat.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
See, I'm going off on some sort of weird conspiracy thing. To go back, is that, and have you researched this? Because in another episode, we talked about the history of a house or history of a business or, something in your family. So, Molly, did you do some research to see if that is still there, that asylum?
Well, I know the building is still there.
Okay.
Every time we would go to visit my grandmother, we would pass by it. And every single time, somebody in the car had to point out that that's where the mental asylum was.
Yeah.
So it's kind of maybe the building is there, but not the business anymore, if you will.
Correct.
Okay.
And it had gone defunct probably in the mid to late 80s. And I found this out about 5:30 last night and had to go. So it is going to be an extra fun task for me to dive deeper into this because nobody ever mentioned this.
Okay, keep us in the loop on it.
Yeah.
'Cause
Absolutely.
We're all excited to hear about this little information.
Well, those are like the detective
Right.
things that
Yeah.
just pop up. Like, wow,
Yeah.
I did not realize Grandpa worked here.
Right.
Those are like those little gems that you never know, and you weren't even really looking for that at all. It just kind
No.
of was there. So that's
I figured he was still living somewhere with my great-great-grandmother. I had not realized all of that background. And going back to the 1940 census, I looked more into my mother's mother, who I did not have a lot of information on. I didn't really know many of her family, and I had never heard about her dad. I had heard bits and pieces about her mom. And as I was looking at the census, I was surprised to find out that my grandmother's, her older siblings were all born in Minnesota. And on that census, you had to list whether your parent was born, like where they were born and where their parents were born. So under my great-grandfather, he was born in Minnesota and his parents were born in Sweden. And I didn't know that either. I thought that entire side of the family was all German.
That is a nice little detective work,
Right?
And a little change. So it's kind of a surprise and a treat when you find that stuff out, because they're like, now you can say, oh my gosh, I'm Swedish. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
And another surprising thing I found too was I was looking for my great grandmother because I couldn't remember my great grandfather's name, and she has her first name was Rose, and she has a very common last name, and I found a Rose, and I found, this was in the 1940 census, I found my my grandmother listed under her as her children and my great aunts and uncles. And I went back to the 1930 census to take a look at what information was there. And as I was typing in, I realized that, I found a Rose who was married to a Floyd and who had children of the same name, but they were living in a different city. And I was like, I don't remember this happening. Turns out there was another family where the mother's name was Rose, and 2 out of their 3 children had the same names as my family.
Wow.
So I had to backtrack quite a bit.
So for the census, the 1950 census, how does it work? They just assign you a sheet and you do that and you're done, or can you keep going, or How does that work?
So you can pick the state and you could pick a last name if you wanted to. And once you were done with that sheet, they would just assign you another sheet. You could ask for another one.
And how long does it take to do a sheet? Is it just different because of the handwriting?
It depends on the handwriting. It depends on the amount of entries on the sheet. And it depends too on how many children were listed, because they'll all have, most of them would have the same last name.
Okay.
Yes. So first it will list the head of household, which they counted the man as the head of the household back then. Then the wife, they would list the children, and then any other non-related adults would be at the bottom. So lodgers
Yeah.
Right.
or family members who were living with them.
I looked at my mom's family. They had a lodger, which kind of surprised me because they didn't have a lot of money or, really huge houses or anything, but also doesn't surprise me because a lodger could help pay for things. But I thought it was interesting because I'd never heard any stories about having a lodger. I think it was my grandparents that had a lodger.
Well, maybe that lodger also kind of, got room and board. They didn't pay him, especially in the Depression.
Yeah.
They don't have any money, But boy, I could use you to haul this hay over here
Yeah,
and then back again.
a little bit of extra labor. Yeah.
Right. And the other thing is, not necessarily talking about digitizing, but the fact is that look at the other neighbors. I think people forget because they're just focused on their family, but that those other neighbors actually could be relatives, maybe in-laws of some sort, that just down the line.
That reminds me of my mom grew up in a town of about 300. They joke that half the town you were related to and the other half were friends of the family or something. So when the kids would misbehave, there was always somebody that called and said, "Hey, your kid's over here messing around."
My teenagers always complained about, you can watch me everywhere on the phone. You can tell everywhere I'm going. So a small town beats the cell phone.
Oh, yeah.
So your job, Molly, is to get more French ancestors online.
Yes.
Right.
To see if you can really track your bloodline with Louis.
Yeah.
I'm sure she heard it from like other ancestors, that goes down in families.
Right.
So do you tell your daughter she's a princess?
She already believes she's a princess.
Yeah.
So I don't need to give her any extra reinforcement.
All right. Thanks, Molly, for being here and
Yep.
being one of the 180,000 people who,
And Katie, too. Yeah.
every time someone goes to the census and tries to look up something, you guys are part of that. And I think that's really important.
It was fun. I just was so curious about it. And I'm like I said, I wanted to make sure that my last name got spelled right. I was like,
Yeah. So many things could go wrong with your last name.
you have no idea.
Okay, well, first of all, thanks for digitizing Molly and now Katie, because we heard your digitizing story. So thanks for that, and I'm sure other people on the podcast who are genealogy fans, they appreciate that. And just want to say thank you, Molly, the 17th. Get it? Thank you for getting that joke. We appreciate your story, for sharing it with us. I always have to put in a disclaimer. We love this disclaimer, right? And to add to the fun, the three of us are not certified genealogists. We are just three people who are sitting around chatting about genealogy. We hope that some or all of this information helps you along the way to finding your family. And we thank you for listening. Okay, say goodbye, ladies.
Goodbye, ladies.
Very nice. We'll see ya.